Today I'll be talking about my mother's personal experience with immigration. My mom was born and raised in Maracaibo, Venezuela. When my mom was living in Venezuela, she had very little experience with immigrants and immigration. She was conscious that many immigrants from Colombia, Italy, and Portugal came to Venezuela for work because their countries were struggling economically. She always felt bad for them because they had their families back in their countries and they had to leave them in order to find better opportunities. She remembers how different immigrants from Colombia would come to her house to cut their yard and do their laundry. She recalls her experience with a specific Colombian immigrant who was working for their family as a maid. Her name was Edilsa, and she would cook, clean, and take care of my mom's brothers and sisters while their parents were working. She was a young lady who was unable to write and read, but my mother would teach her while working on her own homework. These were the first experiences that my mother had with immigrants while she was in Venezuela. When my mother came to the United States for an international conference working with at-risk youth, she became an immigrant in the eyes of the rest of the world. At this conference, she met my father. She met him again at another international conference, and then 3 months after, they got married. My mom talks about feeling fear about leaving her family and stepping out of their comfort zone. The hardest part of becoming an immigrant for my mother was losing her identity. When she was in Venezuela, her family was known by everybody in their area, and she knew all of her neighbors. Once she came to the United States, she was reduced to simply being a Venezuelan lady who knew very little English. This gave her a strong feeling of being alone compared to how she felt in Venezuela. My mom then tells me about the struggles with the language barrier and how it caused people to treat her as if she was less intelligent. This was hard for her to cope with. I asked my mom about the process of immigration and what she had known about it before she had immigrated. And to my surprise, apparently my mother had no concept of the immigration process, but that she knew that my father wanted to get married legally, meaning that they would figure it out once they got to that point. My parents were initially supposed to have a big wedding in Venezuela with my mom's family, but then they found out that they could not leave the country until the paperwork of their marriage was processed, or my mom would not have been able to come back to the United States with my father until the paperwork was done. This kind of led them to cancel the wedding and have a small one with a couple of friends in the United States. My mom had never originally planned to migrate to the United States permanently, but because of how supportive my father was, she started to think about what she wanted for her future. At first, for her, being in the United States was very isolating and made her feel guilt for leaving her family. But after she had had kids and started devoting her life to them, things changed. Her perspective on being an immigrant changed to the idea that anywhere my husband and kids are is where home is. After talking about the actual immigration process, my mother lets me know that she feels that everyone has a different experience with migration, and it usually has to do with finances. She believes that immigration is a very natural process with humans, although it can be very unfair depending on the circumstances. After working with different people in poor communities outside the United States, she's come to understand that there are many instances where these people are not financially able to migrate, or they don't have the proper documents like a birth certificate. She understands that the immigration process is a very complex issue. She also talks about how fortunate she was to have had my father to help her during this process. My mom is actively aware of what's going on in Venezuela and the financial struggles that her family's going through, but she knows that where she's at right now is the best that she can do for them, and she still keeps in contact with them daily. However, she's also conscious that there's not a whole lot that she can do in her position to help them. The issue in her home country is out of hand and out of her control, and the best that she can do is support her family from afar. People will continue to immigrate so long as there are problems in the world. And there are unlimited reasons for why people would need to immigrate or want to immigrate.